There's a mark on every stage around the world that signifies the center of its depth and width, called center center. Friend of the pod, James Whiteside, has dreamed of standing on that very mark as a principal dancer with the prestigious American Ballet Theatre ever since he was a 12-year-old, blown away by watching the company's spring gala. This new, almost memoir, Center Center, is an exuberant behind-the-scenes tour of Whiteside's triple life, both on and off stage. Hear us chat with James about the inspiration behind the book, what the writing process was like, and what he hopes readers will ultimately take away from this collection of essays in episode 247. Grab your copy of Center Center now, wherever books are sold, or click the link in the description of this episode.
I'm Rebecca King-Ferraro.
And I'm Michael Sean Breeden, and you're listening to Conversations on Dance. This week we are joined by choreographer Durante Verzola. Durante began to hone his choreographic talents while training to become a dancer at the Miami City Ballet School. While still dancing professionally at the Pennsylvania Ballet and Suzanne Farrell Ballet, the choreographic notices continued to pour in, and he's since created many works for the Miami City Ballet, Central Pennsylvania Youth Ballet, and many others. We talked to him about his creative process, how he adapted his methods during COVID, and what we can expect to see from him in the future. His work, La Follia, will be performed by Miami City Ballet at the Guggenheim Works Process in New York City on November 21st and 22nd, as well as in Doral, Florida at the Doral Holiday Fest on December 3rd and 4th. Check out our website for links to buy tickets to these incredible programs. Durante, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We wanted to have you on for a long time, and we're so glad that we're finally getting the chance to talk to you.
I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
We've had our eye on your choreography for quite some time, so we're happy to be chatting, but we want to get started at the beginning as we always do with all our guests. So tell us a little bit about briefly how you got your start in dance and your interest in it.
Yes. Well, I first got interested in dance after seeing a cousin of mine do a tap routine. And so I really wanted to be a tap dancer. And so I started tap, and eventually that led me to ballet. I grew up in a military family, so we moved around every 3 years. So I was lucky that my parents were really supportive in making sure I always found a new dance school wherever we were. And eventually I went down to Miami to train at the Miami City Ballet School. Yep. And I finished up my training down there before I went to go dance for the Pennsylvania Ballet for a couple of years, and then with the Suzanne Farrell Ballet.
I'm curious what that, maybe not what toll is not the right word, but what that meant for your training to kind of be moving around so much and going to different schools. Did you find like it was very hard to keep consistent technique training, or did you feel like you were exposed to so much more in different things? What was your main takeaway from that?
I think my main takeaway was I just had a lot of really great teachers that were also very different and focused on different things. And I think that kind of helped give me a more well-rounded view of dance and a overall appreciation for all kinds of different dance and points of view within it.
Right. When did you begin to form an idea of what direction you would like to take your performing career? Obviously, you've been exposed to all these different styles and teachers, but at what point did you kind of hone in on the idea that the balancing style and technique was what you wanted to perform in?
Yes, I think whenever my family was living in Anchorage, Alaska,
gosh.
Yes. Yep, we were up there. And I would go to the library a lot to pass my time. And I discovered the Dance in America, the Balanchine, choreography by Balanchine. They were on VHS tape, and I watched them over and over. And I think that kind of, I was about 10, 11 at this point, and I just became completely obsessed with the Balanchine technique and style and New York City Ballet. And I think it kind of opened my eyes to a way of moving and a musicality and an energy. And so I think at that point I knew that I wanted to train in that technique and style and dance those ballets. Mm-hmm.
So then how did you kind of become aware of Miami City Ballet and that might be part of that journey for you, that you could find that balancing aspect in your training and then maybe in dancing with the school?
I guess I had always heard that it was one of the, top companies to dance Balanchine ballets. And I knew about Edward Villela, and I did an audition for the summer program, but I didn't end up going. And then, I was 16 and I was like, I need to get out of Kansas and go somewhere if I want to make this career happen. And so I just packed up all my stuff and I went down to do the audition for the school year. And luckily I got in and my family left me down there.
Now, was this during Lourdes's time or was Edward still there? What year are we talking here?
So this was in 2012. So I came down and technically
it was her
Lourdes
first year.
hadn't. Yes, it was her first year. So that all kind of happened as in those first couple weeks that I was auditioning and became accepted to the school.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That was the year that Edward was due to finish out the year, but Lourdes began directing the company early.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Very, very big transition for the company. So interesting that you joined the school at that moment. So I'm wondering, at what point did a passion for choreography come into the picture? Obviously, if you love Balanchine, you have a deep respect for, the craft of choreography. How did that influence your own decision to start creating ballets yourself?
I think, I always had a love for making my own dances. I'm the oldest of 6, and I would force my 5 younger siblings to put on shows in our living room and force my parents to sit through them. I would do a whole thing. I would use all of our printer ink and paper to make programs. Like I was very into the whole production of making, putting on a show. And so I think there was always that desire and passion, I think, to make my own work in that way. And when I was down at the school in Miami, my last year in the school, they introduced like a student choreography class. And I did it. And I just had 3 of my best friends and we made a piece, and it was really fun for me. And it was something, that last year of training where you're stressed about what's going to happen with your career as a dancer. That was a really nice kind of getaway and something where I could focus my creative energy into. And I realized how much I really loved it and wanted to pursue that further.
Did you start to maybe then shift your thought process? Like maybe I don't need to, were you ever thinking maybe I don't want to go into a career actually dancing? Like maybe this choreography is for me, or were you still thinking I want to dance and get that part of my career? Maybe this is a next step for me.
Yeah, I think I was thinking more along those lines. But then after a few years of dancing, the choreography thing kind of just took over and I just followed through with that. It felt like it was kind of calling to me in a way. And I really loved, as a dancer, my favorite part of the career was the process. And I think as a choreographer and as a teacher, you really get to hone in on that process and make it all about the process and those relationships that you build in the studio. And so, I just loved every aspect of it and kind of allowed that what was happening with the opportunities I was given in choreography I just followed that. Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, how do you feel your age, your youth affects your work in terms of you are still fully capable of dancing, you're so young still, kind of in the same way, Rebecca, we talked about the distance from being a dancer as a teacher, not, a lot of choreographers very established choreographers, that happens when you've been at it for decades, but you can still, if we wanted to slap some white tights on you, I'm pretty sure we could get you out there. So how does that impact your own work? I mean, because how you could feel what your own work
Mm-hmm.
is like for a dancer because you yourself could do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I mean, I hope that it adds an extra sense of energy into my work, and because I can feel the steps and know exactly, how they work and how they come out of the body. I hope that I can get even more in tune with the music, because I'm like, well, this works, this doesn't work. I think I'm able to transfer the information to the dancers maybe a little bit easier, because I'm able to really feel what it feels like. And I know like where I need to shift my body in order to make these steps happen, to make the movement even more dynamic. So I hope that my ability to still be able to move in that way helps my choreography in that way.
Are you
Right.
often dancing full out in the studios with the dancers? Do you warm up before rehearsals?
I try to, but some days I am hurting because I've done a little bit too much the day before in the studio, that I probably shouldn't have been doing. But I love, as much as I miss kind of being a dancer every single day in that lifestyle of a dancer, I feel like I do get to move and dance a lot, because I do find myself like not being able to help myself just go for the steps when I'm in there.
So I haven't had the privilege of seeing one of your works yet, but I've been following you on Instagram for a long time. And so I see a lot of the great clips that you put out there. And a lot of it involves like a big group of dancers. And you have really interesting ways of coordinating them and moving this big group in and out. And I wonder if that kind of goes back to working with your siblings and having a big group right from the get-go to work with.
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm definitely very good at being bossy, because my whole life I was doing that with my siblings. But it's interesting that you say that, because honestly, moving groups around is the biggest challenge for me, I think, when it comes to choreography. Like it's a lot easier for me to just come up with like a solo or a duet or something like that. But I definitely have to think a lot about how to move the groups around. And I do try to keep it interesting, so it's not like the same old thing that we've seen over and over. And I like to make sure that all the dancers are moving and involved and look alive whenever they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about how you started to gain momentum in terms of having more consistent choreographic work? Like, who were some of your first major supporters that kind of put you on this path to getting consistent commissions?
There's been a couple of people. I've been really lucky to make some great connections and have these great relationships with, people that have really helped me along the way. I think the first person who saw my work when I was a student at Miami City Ballet School was Lourdes Lopez, who's the director of the company down there. And she came to the student choreography workshop, and she saw that first piece that I made, and she came backstage right away. And she was like, "Where did this come from? Like, we had no idea you could do something like this." And so then she took that work from the student choreography workshop and put it in the end of the year like performance with the other ballets that were being shown. And so I think that gave me kind of a little boost of like, oh, no, maybe this is actually like, you love doing this, but maybe this is something that you could make into a career. And then I went off dancing in Pennsylvania, and I didn't tell anybody there that I did any choreography. But the school director from Miami came through to do like their summer program auditions. And she told Arancha Ochoa, who is now the school director at Miami City Ballet School, but at the time was the school director in Pennsylvania Ballet, that I did choreography. And so then she had me do stuff for the school. And from there, the late Barbara Weisberger, who was the founder of Pennsylvania Ballet, she was at the school performance where they were doing my choreography, and she saw my work. And so she made calls to people. So it was kind of all three of those people, Lourdes, Arancha, and Barbara, I think were really instrumental in kind of helping me get my start and getting my name out there and believing in me and giving me the confidence that my work had value and something to say.
Right. And then what kind of came next from there? When did you started getting many more commissions at that point, and you have for the past few years since then? So then who else have you worked with since?
I've gotten to do a lot of like fellowships and won different choreographic awards that have allowed me to create new work. So I think, I've worked and taught a lot at Central Pennsylvania Youth Ballet. I made a work for them and participated in their choreo plan where they bring in choreographers. I worked with, I won Joffrey Ballet's Winning Works, which is for emerging choreographers of color. And as a half Filipino man, I was able to participate in that. So I made a work for their second company. This past summer, I worked at the Center for Ballet and the Arts at NYU and was able to create a new work. So yeah, it's Ballet Chicago, kind of all over the place. Sometimes it's hard to believe that, I've been able to make it work. It's definitely a hustle, and it's definitely a challenge to, make it all work and happen. But I feel really lucky that it has.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about your own personal aesthetic and what informs your choreography. Obviously, you're a balancing baby like us, I'm sure. And I see in your work, of course, the speed and energy and emphasis on musicality that obviously seems to come from that influence. But are there other sources of inspiration that we might not guess just upon immediately seeing your work?
Well, yes, like you said, definitely like that balancing, the speed and all of that. And I try to, in terms of musicality, I try to get even more into the music with every piece that I make. So I think that's where the initial inspiration always comes from. I have to find a piece of music, and it has to work for me, that in terms of that I see it as being danceable. And that's really the only preparation I'll do before getting into the studio, is just knowing the music inside out. I'll fall asleep with it. I'll put it on as soon as I wake up in the morning. But I think other forms of inspiration, I definitely try to be inspired by the environment that I'm in. So say like when I'm down in Miami, like I think there's a real sense, you have the sunlight and you have the ocean. So that kind of renewal that's happening day in and day out. And I try to be inspired by those abstract things as well, and bring that into my work wherever I am. And I try to get out there and see other forms of art, go to museums wherever I am creating work, or, learn the city, see the architecture of the city and the energy of the city. So I think all of those things I try to bring into my work and I think that makes it more human and more alive and more in the moment.
Right. Definitely. I have a question as a follow-up to that. Because I think this is so personal to every choreographer. But what do you consider danceable music? Like what scores are you attracted to, and what's music that you absolutely would never touch? Like how do you
find it?
Yeah.
In my opinion, danceable music, I think it has to have a rhythm within it that you can move to, which I guess is different for everybody. But for me, it has to be a more obvious rhythm, I guess. And I'm attracted to classical music. I think there's so much there and so many pieces that haven't been explored yet. And that music is so intricate. There's so many layers, and so many of the composers and artists that, that created the music, you can feel their passion or their pain or their happy, you can feel all these emotions in it. And I'm able to connect with it a lot easier, I think. So I've made a lot to Haydn. I'm always attracted to Mozart, even though it's extremely intimidating for me because it's Mozart. But I think there's so much intricacies and nuances there to explore. How do I find music? Well, when I was first starting out, I would listen to a lot of classical music radio. I don't listen to the radio so much anymore, but I would find a lot from there, and I would just, write down what I heard. Now I like through Spotify, I'll just keep like the music playing. Like I'll play a piece that I like, and then related pieces will come up to it or things like that. And then I have a big ongoing playlist of different pieces that I'd like to use.
Right. Mm-hmm. Is there something like, what's something, do you ever venture outside of this realm? Like, have you ever just randomly been inspired by like, I don't know, a piece of pop music or something? Or what's something that we would be surprised by?
To be honest, I mean, I am a big, like everything about the 70s fan. Like I love to I spend way too much of my money like going to vintage shops and getting like bell bottoms and things like that. And so I love like collecting records. So honestly, like this would be like so crazy and out of the box for me, but I would love to like make a ballet to like disco music someday and like have like recordings like that are transcribed from the actual record. So you get that like that sound of the record
right
in there. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of something on the back burner for me. I would have to find the right project to do that, but yeah, and I think that music that has rhythm, that has soul and passion to it, and there's so much there to be expressive with.
Definitely danceable. While we're talking about music, have you done a commission yet where the music is given to you and then you have to work around those parameters, or have you been able up till this point to choose what music you're working with?
I've been lucky that I have been able to choose all of my music so far. I guess I don't mean it lucky in the terms of it would be amazing to have a commissioned piece of music, but I think it would be a big challenge to have something that, I didn't pick out myself. So I hope one day
it'll happen.
That's on the horizon. Sure. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how COVID has impacted or altered your workload and definitely in the early days, certainly the creative process, since I'm sure you were doing some Zoom rehearsals, I believe, for Miami City Ballet.
Yes, there was definitely a lot of Zoom. I think at first it was super, just like for everybody, it was very demoralizing and disappointing when everything, I had so much planned in 2020. It was going to be a big year for me. And so to have that all kind of just like come crashing down all at once, it was hard. And, I moved back in with my mom and family, and I took a bakery job. Like it was a whole, it was a big change for me. But I was lucky and people didn't forget about me. And they, when, we found out it was possible to make works over Zoom, then I started doing that. And I was lucky that I got to do things with Miami. I did things with Ballet Chicago. I did a lot of teaching over Zoom, but it did affect my work. It changed my work. I love, like you said, these big group things, and I love huge movement. And whenever I'm, confined to this small space, it affects what the work looks like and the mood of the work and all of that. So I'm glad to be back in the studio now, for sure.
If I'm not mistaken, this Zoom time maybe inspired a work that you did with Center for Ballet and the Arts. Is that right? Based on my reading?
Yes. So it
Tell
did
us a little bit about that.
Yes. It did in the way where over, these pieces made over Zoom, I couldn't do any kind of actual partnering where the two dancers were touching and lifts, turns, all of that. And it kind of forced me to think in a different way to create a pas de deux, and that you don't actually have to touch to make something that a relationship is happening and atmosphere is created on stage. And it actually interested me a lot more than actual traditional partnering. It made me think of steps that were more expressive, more meaningful, more communicative. So I wanted to make a piece at the Center for Ballet that even though the dancers worked side by side in person, that they didn't use any traditional partnering and created something that there was a relationship on stage that you could see and feel.
And you worked with two of our faves from Miami City Ballet, Ashley Knox and Renan Serdiero. And the clips that I've seen look so beautiful. Will that work have another life?
It will. So later this month, it's going to be performed at Guggenheim's Works Process, where I'll be speaking about the piece with the moderator, Linda Murray, who works at the Jerome Robbins Dance Division near Performing Arts Library. And the dancers are going to be, giving an insight of how the piece was created, and then they're going to be performing the full work.
That's so cool.
So awesome. So have you had an opportunity to show your work in the city beyond the original process with Ashley and Renan?
I have had a couple of opportunities. It was shown by Columbia Ballet Collaborative at Columbia University in 2019. They performed a new work of mine. And then actually just last week, I participated in a session at the New York Choreographic Institute with the dancers of New York City Ballet. So it wasn't an on-stage performance, but there was a in-studio showing at the end of the 2 weeks I spent there, where I was able to show what I created.
Was this your first time doing Institute?
It was, yes. So it was a huge dream of mine too. I mean, as a Balanchine lover, as this idolizing New York City Ballet for so long, to be there, and so it was really cool to get to that point.
Yeah, Institute seems like just about every choreographer of note goes through there at some point. Anyone that we think of as a big name now, and a lot of people that go on to have huge careers in Europe that maybe we don't see that much of. Like later on, I'll look back and be like, oh, they did Institute. And it's the same thing for Works in Process. I mean, it's like everyone, they really delve into such a wide array of artists and different forms of dance, and they've made such an interesting, great effort to steer it away from more Eurocentric dance. So for you to get to be a part of what they do too is pretty amazing for someone as young as you are.
Yeah.
No, I'm super excited about it.
I wonder too, have there been changes that you've made to the work since I think you created it at Center for Ballet and the Arts in June? Is that right? Like this summer? And then, so have there been any changes? It's been quite some time now. So what has that process been like, going from that, finished product now to reprising it and bringing it back for Works in Process at the Guggenheim?
Not a whole lot of changes have happened, but I have tried to just develop those ideas of making something that was less traditional, breaking away from those like gendered stereotypes within classical ballet pas de deux. I've tried to develop those ideas even more. And especially since I have the opportunity to really talk about those ideas to the audience and explain them, I've tried to connect more with exactly what I'm trying to get across, which is that ballet can reflect the changing world that we're in, and I think it's important that it does so. And so I hope that this piece kind of is a part of that change.
So South Florida will also be seeing a work of yours. Is this the same work that you've done? You've done so much for Miami City Ballet now that I'm just, so this is what is going at the Guggenheim. Yes or no?
Yes. So it's the same ballet that'll be performed outdoors in Doral, along with a few other ballets.
So for our listeners, the Works in Process is November 21st and 22nd. And then the Doral performance for our Miami listeners is December 3rd and 4th. So it's very exciting. So just before we wrap up, tell us what else you're working on and what's next for you after these performances at Works in Process.
Well, after Works in Process, of course, as you mentioned, I have the ballet will be shown down in Miami. And then I'm really excited in the new year to be working with an all-male company out here in California. It's called Ballet to Dose, and the men perform on point. And so I'm really excited to create for them and get to, continue to kind of break down those boundaries that are within classical ballet and explore other facets of it. So I'm really excited about that.
So this goes back to us talking about you still being a current dancer and being able to show everything. Are you going to dabble in those point shoes and show them?
I don't think I'm going to be ready for that. But I'll try my best to get them comfortable up there and create some pretty beautiful steps for them.
Mm-hmm. I was just thinking, I thought you would appreciate this because as a Balanchine nerd, but hearing you talk about, dismantling those ideas and, sort of pervasive gender roles in the art form, it made me think Balanchine would always say this about different things when he would do something that was kind of, controversial, like when he would cut something from the music, or I think when he flipped the final movement, the last two movements of Serenade, he flipped, right? That's not how they're played by symphony orchestra. But he would say, I can do it because I love it. So it's like, I know how much of a bunhead you are and what a classical ballet dork you are. And you're like, I can dismantle it because I love it. I'm allowed to.
Exactly. Yes. I'm the biggest bunhead ever. And so I have this deep love and appreciation for it, but I also know that it can change and still uphold the tradition in a way, but kind of evolve with where we are in the world. So
yeah.
And it's like Viola Verdi used to say, Susie told us this, change is good.
How true.
Yeah. I love that. Well, before we sign off, Durante, tell us where we can find you on social media so people can follow you.
Yes. So I'm most active on Instagram. My Instagram is just Verzola Ballet. And then I also have a website, which is verzolaballet.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you
so much for joining us.
Yes. Thank you both so much.